Hi, everyone. Welcome into Parent Chat. I love that tonight's Parent Chat is more of a meeting format versus a webinar. So welcome. And I can see someone walking with a beautiful blue sky. Thank you for sharing that with us all. That's wonderful. Anu, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. So I think you'll have to stop yours before I can share mine. 1 second, everybody. For those of you who have attended a lot of these, I'm actually in a different room, so my lighting is not set up as a studio lighting, so you will have to forgive me for that, but let me share my screen so everybody can see our slides. If you can give me the thumbs up, because I can see some of you guys. Can you see the? Great, thank you, thank you. And also we have an interesting weird Zoom thing. So a lot of people are going to have the same name. We haven't exactly figured out why that is. But so if you're looking at your name and it's wrong, we don't know why that is. But if you want to take a moment and change your name, I believe you can. Just go down to at the bottom or top of your screen, it says participants, and you should be able to find yourself, I think. But that may be a little confusing since we've got so many people with all the same name. But you might be able to find either your picture, or it may put you at the top of it, I think. But if you want to do that, you can. And I see that some are actually your real name, so don't know what's going on. But hello, everybody. The rest of the tech is doing fine, so that's the good news. And we just don't know what's going on with the names. It's interesting, but welcome in, welcome in. This is sadly the last Parent Chat of the season because we are heading into the summer months, but there are lots of recordings. If this is your first Parent Chat, welcome in. If you've been joining us throughout the year, welcome back. And if you missed some things, you can actually go and find those on the Balance of Mind YouTube channel. We have everything recorded from this year that's sitting up there just waiting for you. And we have a lot of different topics. I would ask Val and Anu, who are here kind of behind the scenes helping tonight, maybe you can put some of the topics in the chat box so that people know what they can go back and find. We've got a lot of really, really interesting ones. And so tonight, because this is as a meeting, not a webinar, we don't have our typical Q&A box. We just have the chat box. So any questions you have can go there, and we will be looking for all of those questions. I will either answer them as I go if it kind of fits in, or we will answer them at the end. And any questions you have, you can just pop in there, technical questions, or if you have questions about the presentation tonight. So with that, let's get started. Let me make sure that everything's working. Always have to take a minute to make sure all the tech is in line. Otherwise, it becomes a little bit of a mess as we go. Okay, I think we've got everything lined up here. And as we go, if anything is kind of off, you can just tell me in the chat box and we'll make sure we fix that right up. Okay, so good evening, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. I'm Coach Sheri. I'm the founder of TeenWise, and I'm a very proud member of the Balance of Mind team. I have integrated over 30 years of experience in the psychological field and 25 years of parenting. I bring that information and kind of synthesize it into information, ideas, and concepts so that you can take what I've learned over the years and up-level your own parenting. A few years ago, I read this book that I loved called Conversational Intelligence. Has anybody heard of that? It's kind of an obscure book. And in fact, I bought a couple copies because I think it's kind of going out of print. But I read this book and it was interesting because it's a business book. But as is my habit, when I'm reading new information, I'm always thinking, how does this line up with the parent-teen connection? And so this book I thought was fascinating, that even though it was for a work environment and for a sales team and for management, I thought this is exactly what parents and teens need. And I do say teens because I primarily work with tweens and teens. If you have younger kids, all of this is relevant as well. So pardon me that I do say teens a lot, but this is information that if you've got younger kids, this is still extremely relevant. So I saw how important this emotional intelligence is and the conversational intelligence. And so I kind of put that together, and I'm bringing that to you tonight so you can understand what this means and how you can use this in your everyday conversations with your kids, and it will really better your conversations and your relationship. You'll see how that kind of works as we go. Now, hundreds of parents throughout the years have asked me a lot of questions about how to better communicate with their teens. How do they keep the lines of communication open? So if you have younger teens or younger kids, you might be thinking, well, I've got great conversations going on right now, an open line of communication. So for you, you're going to be thinking of this in terms of how do you keep it going? Some of you have older kids and you feel completely disconnected from them. So you're going to look at this through the lens of how do I reconnect? And then some of you with the teens already that you're like, okay, we're doing pretty good. Again, you're going to think of how do you keep that connection going? Now, when people ask me this, how do I better connect? There's not one answer. There's no easy answer, because parenting is all about assessing, changing, being flexible, learning along the way, because there's so much stuff that's going on. And if you have more than one kid, you've probably realized you can't figure it out for one and then it automatically works for the others. That's one thing that makes parenting so hard, right? So parenting is really about a willingness to adapt and to change along with your kids, with their needs and their wants and their style of learning and taking in your parenting advice and such. So the most important thing, though, in all of that is unconditional love. And what we're going to be talking about tonight is a way for you to convey that there is that underlying unconditional love and trust. Now, a lot of the parents that I've crossed paths with have been really lost and really sad and frustrated. And many of them are on the verge of giving up, where they're just like, we've disconnected. That's how it is. And I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to keep moving forward. And I hope that if you are in that position right now, you're feeling that you're just ready to give up. I hope that tonight leaves you with some really great information and some concrete ideas of how to change that around. I want you to leave here tonight with hope and with strategies. What I don't want you to leave with tonight is guilt and feeling bad about yourself, because all of us have done some things in our parenting journey that were like, that was not a stellar parenting moment. All of us have felt that. So if you're feeling that right now in this moment, don't worry about it. You're here tonight, which shows what an amazing parent you are. So tonight we're focusing on the basic necessity, which is trust. This is the basic necessity for connecting, reconnecting, and staying connected to your kids. And that stands for something. It's TRUST. And when I say trust, I don't just mean like everything I say is I'm honest about it. There's many nuances and many layers to trust, especially when we're talking about a relationship and when we're talking about conversations. So when you're able to establish trust in a relationship, some amazing things happen, especially in the parent-child relationship. It allows for growth. It allows for collaboration, for openness and vulnerability. And that's when the real conversations are had. Now, I've chosen to focus on this trust because it's the number one reason that teens tell me that they disconnect from their parents. And I've spoken to a lot of teens, okay? Without trust, here's what happens. The conversations become very superficial, very top level. And they become transactional. They become infrequent. They become monosyllabic, which I'm sure all of you know what I'm talking about, that I'm fine, I don't know, yeah, good, all of that. And then often fraught with a lot of friction. But when I ask teens why they don't talk to their parents, the bottom line is they don't trust their parents. Now, you might be thinking that you're always trustworthy. How would your kid not trust you? You're always honest. But as I said before, truth isn't just about honesty. It's much deeper than that. It's about feeling safe to be oneself, to bring up concerns and grievances, to speak without receiving judgment, to speak without constantly getting consequences. Trust is about feeling secure and voicing alternative opinions and thoughts. It's also about emotional safety. Not always being worried about the next big blow up or whether or not mom or dad is going to be calm or raging, whether or not mom or dad is going to be loving or harsh, judgmental or compassionate. So we have to think about this. All of that is wrapped up in trust. It's not just about, are you telling the truth? And here's why this is so important. On the easy days, it's easier to get a conversation in. When the difficult times come up, we need to have this foundation of trust before the difficult times come up so that we can have that conversation, so we can support, so we can show them how much they love them, even in the difficult times. So times like they failed a class, or they got in trouble at school for cheating, or they tried drugs or vaping or alcohol, or they were very disrespectful to you, or they are experiencing extreme depression or anxiety, or they're dealing with growth drama, which is one of my areas of expertise. So you have to put trust at the forefront through connection, calm, and unconditional love. Is this resonating with anybody? I'd love for you to put something in the chat box so I know you all are here. Just say if something resonated with you there, or tell me how you're feeling about your communication with your kids right now. Okay, so why is trust so important? Why is this what I'm going to spend tonight? Our last parent chat of the season. Why am I talking about trust? When a person or your child feels the lack of trust, their brain kicks into the fight or flight mode. And we've all heard about this fight or flight mode, right? There's part of your brain that's like a little judge and jury. It's like a little guard, a little soldier. It's constantly scanning the world around you to see if you're safe or you're not safe. For your teen, they're looking, is this friend or is this foe? And when it's determined that you are a foe, their emotions are large and in charge. Their body has a physical rev up of chemicals, of energy, and they're not thinking logically, and they're not open to connection. And here's what we're up against, parents. Your child is actually wired to see you as foe, not friend, once they enter adolescence. Why is that? Because it's an evolutionary thing. From the caveman days, like way back then, right? They needed to push their parents away and go find their extra little group for safety reasons. They needed people beyond their parents to help to take care of them. So yes, we've got this. Our kids, that's why when you say their name and they think, what? Or they answer you and they're like already mad, or they think you're mad. That's this whole weird wiring thing. I mean, let's face it, if they were like they were when they were 2, they would never want to leave the nest. We would never want them to leave the nest. So there's something powerful in this, that they're wired to do that, because otherwise, they might be home forever. For some of us, that sounds good. Sometimes not so much. All right. Okay, so luckily tonight, even though our kids are wired to push us away, we know now, or we're going to learn about trust, the T-R-U-S-T. There's 5 components to it. And when we can learn this and start to put it into our conversations, into our everyday conversations with our kids, then we're kind of combating that evolutionary pushing us away. They still need their independence, but we can be there as a support person. So the 5 pieces to trust are trust. The first should be transparency. It is, transparency. The first is transparency. Then relationship, then understanding, shared success, and testing assumptions. And we're going to go through each of these so you will understand that a little bit better, right? Okay, and someone's asking, not sure how to bring trust back. That's what we're going to learn about today. So if you are in that space where you feel like it's totally disconnected and there's trust that's gone from one side of the relationship, these are the things that are going to work to help get that connection back. I will remind you that it takes time, though. It's not overnight. Sometimes it's overnight, but it's not always overnight. Okay, transparency is the first one here. Now, what does this word mean? And if some of you can type in what you think transparency means off the top of your head, that would be great. I always like to see what it means to you. And this is not a quiz, so there's no right or wrong here. So transparency, if we think of it in the terms that we use for every day, transparency means being able to see through something, right? That's the simplest terms. And by being transparent with your teen, what you're doing is you are quelling the reptilian brain. You're saying everything is okay here. If you don't create transparency, then there is uncertainty. And uncertainty is the fulcrum between trust and distrust. And remember, distrust means that little guardian in the brain kicks in and says, you are not safe here. And then there's no logic and no connection and no open conversations. Now, in this case, we're talking about the transparency of what to expect from you when they have a conversation with you. Parents tell me that they always let their kids know that they can come and talk to them about anything. Who has said something like, you can talk to me about anything? Raise your hand or give me an emoji or something. Have you told your kids, you can talk to me about anything? I'm going to wait a second because I actually want to know if people are saying this to their kids. You can do it either with an emoji in the chat box, or you can do a little, I think, a reaction thing. Yes, I see one thumbs up. Yes, yes. Yeah. And this is what I hear a lot. Parents say, but I tell my kids they can talk to me about anything. I don't understand why they don't. And these are all loving parents, right? All of you who are saying, yes, I know you're a loving parent because you're here. But yet we say this and it falls flat for some reason. And I'm going to show you why. They don't know exactly what that means. There's no transparency when you say, you can come and talk to me about anything, because they don't know what happens next. Of course, they can come and tell you words, right? They don't even need your permission for that. But what they need to know, so there's no uncertainty, is what happens when I come and tell you something. So that's what we need to be very specific about. So here's what you need to say to them. After you say, you can talk to me about anything, I'm going to listen to you. I won't judge you. I won't blow it out of proportion. I'll love and support you. Do you see how different that feels? Instead of just saying you can talk to me about anything, right? Give me an emoji or something, a heart. I don't know what the emojis are that you can put in there. But that feels so, so different. And think of it if it was you, if your boss, let's say, said, you can come talk to me about anything, but you don't know if you're going to get fired, if you're going to get someone else fired, if they're going to get mad at you, if there's a written report about it. All of that is uncertainty. So you may or may not go and talk to your boss about it. And this goes for anything with the school, right? If you report a bully, or if you, tell a teacher that you need extra time, you need to know all the after things, especially the kids. Okay, so let's remember that. And maybe Val and Anu, maybe we can put this as a infographic in our group or something, or follow up. Okay, so here's the thing. Trust versus distrust. We've got this thing that's constantly going on. And our kids, even though you think, oh, they trust me, remember, it's not you per se, it's your relationship that they're trusting. So each time you fail to follow through on the trust, or those 4 things that we're going to tell them, no judging, we're just going to listen, all of those things. If we don't do it, there's another weight on the scale towards distrust. And at some point, the scale can become so overweighted on the distrust side that your teen stops coming to you. And this is why, if you think I tell them to talk to me, but they've stopped talking to me, there's something for them that weighed that on the distrust side. Now, if you're in that position, it doesn't mean that it's over, there's no hope. It just means you're going to have to work a little bit harder to get it back over to the trust side. Your connection is not completely lost. It's there. And I can tell you, your kid wants a connection with you. They just need a different kind of connection with you. So this is important, that you're always working on trust, and specifically the transparency. You're always working on this so that your kids know what kind of parent you're going to be that day, and they know what to expect when they come and talk to you. Are there going to be days where you kind of flub it and you yell or you get upset? Absolutely. But those days should be few and far between. And if it happens, you go and you fix it by talking to them and conversing with them and having that open conversation. All right, so let's move on to the R. R is relationship. Let me move some things around because I can't see our chat box here. All right. Okay, any questions? Remember, you can pop those into the chat box. We will keep track of those. So it doesn't have to be, even if it's something not exactly what we're talking about, you can throw that in there and we'll make sure that we answer that. Okay, so relationship. It is so important that we really work on establishing and maintaining a relationship with our teens. Part of creating trust is establishing a relationship in order to have loving and compassionate conversations. But think about the people in your life that you talk to and that you share with. It's not strangers. I mean, you might talk to them a little bit, but you don't share the difficulties with strangers normally. So you have to have this relationship. You might be thinking this, Coach Sheri, is a very odd suggestion because I've known my kid forever. Of course, we have a relationship, but keep in mind that your kid is changing a lot. And as they're changing, it's your job to keep up with who they are. And in adolescence, how confusing is that, right? One day they're dressing in one way, and the next day they're dressing another. One of my own daughters used to wear bright colors, stripes, and all these things, and then went to gray and darker colors, which is what a lot of kids do in middle school. But so your kids are not the same as they were 5 years ago, 5 months ago, 5 hours ago, in some cases 5 minutes ago, because they are changing literally their brain and their body, but also because they're having experiences along the way. The experiences that they have form how they see the world. They form their personalities, their identities. So if you want to know who your kid is, you have to work on this relationship. And let me say it again, it is your job to stay connected, not theirs. Their job is actually to push you away. So in the busy lives of teens and parents, this is what I often see. Getting things done, the to-do list, the forever perpetual to-do list, comes before the relationship. This especially kicks in when they hit middle school and high school. Or when you have multiple kids, then it's harder to kind of make the relationship a priority. Does anyone feel like that? Like every time you're talking to your kids, it's about the to-do list? Like it seems like that comes up for everybody, right? So you might be talking about when you see them, do you have homework? Do you need to do the chores? Do you need to, I don't know, fold your laundry? Do you need to do that big project? Do we need to run to the store to get new groceries? You know, when you're doing this and when that's the first thing that you're talking about with your kids, and it's what you're constantly talking about, then the primary focus of your interactions makes them feel less seen as a person, less heard, less appreciated, because it's all about the do, let's go, right? Remote control parenting instead of just talking with them, yeah. Yeah. So imagine if you put your relationship with your teen before the perpetual to-do list. How would that feel differently? How would that feel differently? If it's not all about the homework and all the stuff you have to do, it would be so different. I'm going to tell you how it would feel because I talk to a lot of teens. They would feel more respected, and you would have a much better rapport with them. And they would feel like you care about them as a human being, as a person. They would feel like you care about their mental health more than their achievements and getting things done. Now, of course, you always care about your teens, but sometimes our teens don't understand that when it's all about the doing. They feel like a worker bee instead of your child. The other amazing thing that happens when you put your relationship before the to-do list is you have more opportunity to listen, to deeply listen, and to show that you care. Because again, what we think shows we care is not necessarily what the teens need to know that you care. So when you put the relationship with your teen first, you're going to begin to reestablish trust. So if you're having a rocky time right now, and if you think back to the last couple of days, what was it that you said to your teen when you first saw them? Did you come in and see them on the couch on their phone, and the first thing you say is, why are you always on your phone? Did you do your homework? Or is the first thing, oh, I'm so happy to see you today. I hope you had a great day. Something like that. Or are you hungry? Why don't we get your favorite snack today? Or I thought of you today. I got your favorite snacks at the store. So you see how it doesn't mean you don't ask about homework, you don't talk about the phone, but is it the first thing that you're saying? And here's the really cool thing. When you change this up and you get this pattern of connecting before correcting or connecting before redirecting, then you and your child's brain waves actually are attuned to each other. You and your child's heart rate becomes attuned to each other. That's pretty phenomenal, right? This is when the connection is happening. And if it's all about the to-do list, what will happen with the heart rate is their heart rate is going to get elevated because they're going to be worried about what did they do wrong or not get done. What are you going to ask about now when they see you walk in the door? You don't want that. You want them to be happy to see you walk in the door and vice versa. So you've really got to work on it. Okay. So in the end, think about it. 10 years from now, what's more important, the connection you have with your teen or that the trash was taken out? Does the trash need to be taken out? Yes, sure, they need to do chores, but the connection is number one. Okay. Every aspect of trust that we're learning tonight, the TRUST, it's all important, but understanding, if you can add understanding into the mix, it is a game changer for parenting, for you being able to stay calm, for you being able to support your kids. Sadly, a lot of us forget what it was like to be a teen or to be a 6-year-old, whatever age your kids are. It's very easy for us to just look at it from an adult perspective and a parent perspective versus as a teen or a child. Now, we have to remember that the years that you have under your belts really can impede your ability to see things from their view. All you might see as the behavior or the frustration that your teen just isn't doing the things that you want them to do. They aren't fulfilling their responsibilities, they're overreacting to situations, they're squandering away opportunities. That may be what you're seeing, right? But what about all the other stuff, right? Now, as we live life, your brain looks for patterns and it looks for familiarity, and it tries to make sense of behaviors based on those patterns or stories that are running through your subconscious. This means that when your teen behaves a certain way, you try to make sense of it through your stories and your experiences and your wisdom, but they are living a different life, right? Like if they can't get their homework done in half the time, you're like, why is it taking them so long? Why don't they just focus? You know that if you don't worry about what others think of you, life is more fulfilling. Why don't they just do that? Why do they care about other people? You know that it makes sense to throw away the empty milk carton, right? And not put it back in the fridge. But that's because we're wise and we've had more years on the planet. But if you can consider what your teen is feeling, thinking, dealing with, you're going to find a compassion and a calm that is refreshing and life-changing. You will be able to stay calm in situations that seem out of control. You're going to find empathy even in the most challenging of situations, like the dirty dishes lying around the room. You're going to find an understanding when they fail a test. You're going to stop and consider what is happening in the context of their world, not yours. How do you understand your teen better? You listen. You work on listening, deep listening to them with an open heart and listening to them to understand what they're going through. Listening to read between the lines. Let go of your agendas. Let go of raising a high achieving child. Let go of your agenda of raising a happy child. Or one who changes the world, who makes a difference. Instead, listen and understand what your child is going through right here and right now in this moment. We have to think about the future, but we also need to be present here and now. Not even worried about graduation. Listen to understand who they are right here and now. Who they are right here and now, not who you want them to be. There's a really great movie called Freaky Friday. If you haven't seen this, it's a good one to watch with your teens. Basically, the mom and the daughter switch bodies, and the mom got a whole different understanding of what her daughter was going through and vice versa. So we can't do that. We don't have that luxury. But it's really important that we really think about what their life is like. There's a lot of stuff they're going through, right? So let's see. Val's asking, how do you deep listen? And listen is something I actually do like a 5-day workshop on this, but let me give you the basics of listening. There's different levels, like 5 different levels of listening. And true listening is listening without thinking about what you're going to say next. For parents, deep listening is don't judge. So many times we're listening for things that we need to correct, or we're listening for things that they get wrong, or things that we need to be teaching them. If we can listen without, I'm going to give them advice, I'm going to fix all these things, then that is kind of the first level for you as a parent. And so just letting them talk without the purpose of, I need to fix it, or I need to correct them. That's the first step of deep listening. And your kids will feel a difference. When I am private coaching with parents, and I private coach with the kids mainly, and then I will help the parents along too. And I will give them some of this advice, and they'll be like, wow, that changed things for me. Because I'm not in this mode of having to fix it or correct them. I'm there to get to know them and to love them and to show them I care about them and to just let them be who they are. All right. At what point do you give advice? That's a good question. And Anu and Val, if you could remind me to get back to that one. I'm going to address that in a bit. I see some great questions in here. So Anu and Val, if you can just keep track of those, we will definitely come back to those great questions. Okay, the next one, shared success. So this, unlike the other components of trust, remember this was originally for a business setting. This one is definitely part of the parent-teen things, but it's not always there, all right? So you don't always make your teen successes into a shared success. So just remember that. I don't want you to think in certain situations that you had nothing to do with it. How could you share the success? So don't worry about that. But overall, the shared success is working together to get things done and celebrate when they're achieved. So what's going to happen is when you begin to think of things in these terms, you're going to have a more collaborative relationship. Because right now, there's a lot of, and right now, meaning teen years, adolescent years, there's a lot of friction that happens in the parent-teen relationship. So when you're also in this shared success or collaborative relationship, you let go of the need to be right. And I hear from a lot of teens, like they will do something their way and their parents are like, no, you need to do it this way. And it's really sad because the teens are often quite proud of how they've done something, but the parents want it done their way. So if you can let go of the need to be right, it really helps. And you move from entrenchment in your way or the highway to discovery and enlightenment. You're looking for collaborative solutions and new perspectives, because our kids do have some great ways to do things. Oftentimes they'll tell me a different way to do something. I'm like, oh yeah, I never thought about that, right? It's also an opportunity to focus on shared interests rather than self-interests. And chores are a good example. Are you asking your teen to do the chores because you need them to, you want them to? Or are you asking them to do chores because as a family, you all deserve a relatively clean living space? So what a difference in how you're looking at chores and presenting chores, right? This we versus I need you to do this. With shared success also comes the opportunity to ask your teen for their suggestions and their ideas. Your teen or your kids love to be the expert at things. So if you're able to offer them the opportunity to teach you or to show you new ways, they love it. And they should be able to push back, honestly, respectfully, without fear of consequences or retribution. They don't always have to just say yes and do it your way. And if you're in this together, you're co-creating and you're collaborating, you want to focus on dialogues and conversations rather than lectures and monologues. And for some of us, I know that is really difficult. So shared successes are a great way to get away from the constant tension of parent against teen and instead move towards a compassionate and collaborative relationship. All right, so we're on our last one here. Testing assumptions and expectations. Assumptions and expectations can cause a lot of tension in the teen-parent relationship and the parent-child relationship. And you know what? This doesn't stop after the teen years. Some of you probably feel this with your parents and yourself. There's expectations and assumptions. So your parenting choices can often be a reaction to your teen's behaviors based on your assumptions and your own truths in your life. That leads to reactions, emotional reactions of anger. It can ramp up anxiety, yours and theirs, and it can lead to withdrawal and resignation to the status quo. None of that sounds good, right? When you can put your assumptions and expectations to the side, what happens is it allows you to put judgment to the side. It allows you to let go of disappointments. You can talk to your teen about the assumptions and expectations that you have. This would be a great conversation starter, and see if they think they are realistic. And if they aren't, be open to reestablishing your expectations and assumptions together, collaboratively. What are some of the expectations? Let's just put these in the chat box. And by the way, you can put in the chat box, if you want to stay anonymous, just say to put it to, I think you can put straight to me. Let me just check here. I think you can send it straight to me. If not, you can send it to Balance of Mine. Right, but what are some of the expectations you have in your household that maybe if you're thinking about this from a self-reflection point of view, maybe it's a big expectation or a big assumption. All right. Now, some common assumptions that I hear about from teens are that their parents, when they have low grades, their parents think they don't care about their grades. A lot of times they'll put on a front that they don't because they're really frustrated that their grades aren't higher. Teens who have a dirty room are lazy. Kids hear this all the time. Sometimes it's because their mental health is suffering or they're just so dang busy that they can't clean their room. There's an assumption that teens don't want to spend time with their parents. But what the teens tell me is, I do want to spend time with my parents, but not doing the things that they want to do. Expectations are they need to get high GPAs. They need to give everything they do to 110%. They can't ever quit. Probably some of these are sounding familiar, right? All right. And there have been many times over the years where I've been very glad, very thankful that I didn't base my conversation on my assumptions. So I'll give you an example. There was a time when one of my daughters came home late from curfew. And you know how that goes when they're late. You're worrying, you're getting angry, you're getting worried, you're getting angry, and it kind of ramps up, right? So when they come in the door, you can lead with anger, or you can lead with compassion and love and unconditional love, right? So instead of me greeting her with anger and consequences, I said, hi, you're back a bit past curfew. What happened? So she started crying and told me the whole story. She was having a difficult time with a friend. They were talking it out. So she didn't feel like she could leave in the middle of the conversation. She also didn't feel like it was respectful to pick up her phone and start texting. So we were able to have a great conversation about this. And if I would have led with the anger and consequences, I wouldn't have had that conversation. So I was able to support her, have that unconditional love, and still give the consequence. Like, okay, I'm so sorry this happened. We talked, half an hour or so. All right, so the consequence is that tomorrow night your curfew is 30 minutes earlier than normal. No pushback because we connected and we had that trusting, loving conversation. So, but if I had acted on my assumptions and my anger, it would have been a very different end to the night. Okay. All right. Oh, I'm so sorry you have to go, but this will be recorded and you will get an email with the recording. Definitely. Okay, so I want to give you some very concrete ideas here because I know I've kind of talked a little bit up here. So let's bring this down to every day. And I'm not giving you a 5-page booklet of do these things just because I don't want you to be overwhelmed. It's better to start with a few things and make those changes and stick with them. Even when your teen's pushing back so that you can feel the difference and really experience the difference that having these trusting conversations makes. So here's the thing. When you're having the conversation, don't take it over, okay? They will feel powerless and they will feel childish. And especially if they are in the middle school, high school years, that's going to to deter them from coming back for more. Don't shame them. Whatever they're talking about, if there's a difficulty, I can guarantee you they're already feeling bad about the situation. Many of your kids are going to put up the front like they don't care, whatever, but they do. They're just trying to save face. Don't let your emotions overshadow theirs. I hear this from so many kids. They'll say, I don't want to tell my parents anything anymore because they either get super angry or they get really sad or they're really frustrated. So they have to know that when they come to you, it's about that transparency, right? The trust is that you are going to be that calm, loving parent every time they come to you. Even when you're really angry about what they're doing, or you know they made a huge mistake, that you're still going to be the same parent every time. And so if your emotions overshadow theirs, what they're going to do is they're going to feel like a burden, first of all, but they're also not going to want to come back and talk to you. And don't catastrophize. If something happens, if your kid does something, don't make it seem like it's the end of the world, because they are already feeling bad about it, right? They need to know that there's a positive way to get out of the situation, whatever that situation is. We'll take an easy one. They fail a test, right? They've never failed a test. Oh my gosh, I failed a test. If you're like, oh my gosh, you failed a test, what happened? That just piles it on. If you say, okay, what do you think happened? What do you think the next step is? Is there a way to retest? And then you're collaborative again. You're having this really great connection and conversation. All right. All right, I have to see this motion support. I'm gonna have to read that article. Make sure I get that one. Okay, next one. So what you want to focus on is building the trust. And you do that with the love. What they really need is love. It's an easy way to remember that they need you to listen, to offer advice. And somebody asked this question, so I will expand on that a little bit. You need to validate emotions and empower them when possible. So the listening, I talked a little bit about what the deep listening is. Let me talk about offering advice. When you offer advice, you want to make sure that you're giving them the option of listening to your advice versus here, you're going to take it, or versus the lecture. And when you offer them the advice, here's the amazing thing that happens. When you have asked them that question, do you want me to just listen or do you want advice? You are empowering them and giving them the choice. So if you start to give them advice, they've already said yes to it. So their brain is more open to it and their heart is more open to it. Instead of, yeah, I already know that, I already tried that, because you've said, yes, it's okay to give advice. So that's really, really important. Let's see. Okay. So let me ask Anu and Val, are there some questions that I can answer? I know there were a couple up there that I missed.
Yes,
you can either.
there
Okay,
are. Oh, hang on. It sounds like you're getting feedback. Okay. First, I wanted to just say that someone had mentioned an article in the New York Times, and I just put a link in the chat with a gift article. So it means even if you don't have a Times subscription, you can read the article. And it was good. But yes, you have questions on at what point do you give advice? Because I know we all want to do that. We have learned so much in our lives.
Right. Okay, so let me answer that one first. At what point do you give advice? And I think I've answered it here, but let me just be more clear on it, just in case. So the first thing you want to do is listen to them. So if your kids come to you and they start telling you something, don't interrupt their train of thought or their stream of consciousness, if you will, because when you do that, a lot of times they're speaking from the heart and they're speaking with their emotions. So if you ask a question, it spits them into the logical side of their brain and it interrupts that. So let's say they answer your question and then you say, okay, go on. They might not know where to start. And that might be the end of what they share with you. So asking questions is kind of interrupting it. So I'll just say that first. So the second piece of that is just let them talk. And then you can either ask them that question, do you want me to listen or do you want advice, before or after they start talking? And depending on what they say, you have to honor that. If they say, no, I don't want advice, then you can say, okay, I appreciate that. Just know I'm here for you. If you want to hear, I do have some ideas. And they'll probably circle back with you. But it puts it into their hands.
That's a great way to think of it. I can tell you the number of times I've just dropped right into giving advice instead of
Yes.
saying, okay, I
Yeah,
have to
Val,
respect your
yeah.
choice.
Yeah, and we do that because not because we're bad parents, we do that because we care so much about our kids. We're like, oh my gosh, I know how you can fix this easily, right? You want to tell them, but that's based on our many, many years of being on this planet. And so many times the advice we give anyway, we have to remember that they may not be able to do that. Because we come at it from, I wish I would have done that when I was their age. I wish I would have stood up for myself. I wish I would have advocated for myself. We have to remember that they haven't gone through what we've gone through yet.
Yeah, and that might be something they just can't do at this point.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so you have another question which is, what if there is no option of listening since they don't want to share?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, so there are still ways to create a foundation of trust, even when your kid doesn't open up to you. For some people, that's just your kid's way of doing things. It may have been like that forever in your relationship. For other people, you're like, well, they used to, but now they don't. If they used to, but they don't now, there's some things that you can do, taking this trust into consideration that we've been talking about tonight, to rebuild that trust and restart conversations. And even though with no conversations, you can still do things to reestablish the connection. It's things like knowing their love language. You might give them a little gift. And I don't mean like spending money even, just something that says, I know who you are. I know what you like. You might put a note for them somewhere. You might bring them their favorite boba, something that says, I see you, I know you, I love you, I care about you. And that can start some of the conversations. Also, I would say if your child is not a sharer, don't push and push and push. And don't feel like you're a bad parent because they're not like that. They may be just a thinker. They may be really introverted. And so when you're there talking to them, I guarantee you they're thinking tons of thoughts. And if you are an extrovert and your kid's an introvert, you've got to remember to leave silence, to give them time to think and respond and talk to you. Sometimes that can help to restart those conversations too.
So someone asked, and boy, I know most parents will probably resonate with this. They said, when they ask if they want advice, the answer is, I don't know. So what's a good response?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's probably like the top 3 words in the teen language, right? I don't know. If they say, I don't know, then you can say, okay, well, how about I give you some advice and you can decide if you want to take it or not. So you can start with that. If they say, I don't know, it's kind of a maybe, right? So you can start with your advice. Take it, lean towards the yes on that because they have not said no.
I like that. So a slight follow on or on the same tangent, but what do you do when your teen stops giving you respect, doesn't even acknowledge that you are present, no greetings? And I know this is a specific question, but boy, those teen years, there's a lot of, they don't give you respect because they're not picking up the things that you've told them 15 times to do. They just want to go straight to their room and shut the door.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different levels there. And, one thing, the first thing I want to say about that is we don't start playing the game tit for tat. Like if they're disrespectful, we're going to be disrespectful. I hear a lot of parents kind of fall into that trap because they're frustrated and don't know what to do. So they're like, well, if they speak to me like that, I'm going to speak to them like that. And that really, we don't want to role model the bad behavior. So we have to first think, okay, we're going to continue to be kind, loving, compassionate parents, no matter what that kid does. Now, it doesn't mean that you're a doormat. It doesn't mean that you are just acting like everything's fine, everything's good. You have to set your boundaries very clearly and compassionately. So if your child is very angry and says, I hate you, for instance, reflect on that. Like, it's not okay they said that. And you can say very calmly, I don't deserve to be spoken to like that. And then remember the you and trust, the understanding. Why do you think your kid said, I hate you? Do they really hate you? Probably not. Are they really mad at you? Maybe. More likely, they're emotionally overwhelmed by something that's going on in life that may have nothing to do with you. So when you can go back to that understanding, you're like, oh my gosh, that really hurt that they said that. But wow, they must really be hurting. They must really be overwhelmed. So you calmly set your boundary to show role model what that looks like, and then you move on.
Yeah, that's a hard one though, boy, because I know it gets the emotional.
Yeah. And when you start having these conversations again, when you're coming in with that respect and love and all of that, you can start to see a turnaround in your kids. And there's a couple things that I see here when the kids become really disrespectful. One is that the parent does become a doormat because you're a nice, kind, loving parent. So there's the extreme of, okay, so I don't ever give consequences. I never kind of role model boundaries. And so they're pushing at you. And they'll do that because kids do want boundaries, whether they actually know it or not. They want boundaries from their parents. So many times with permissive parenting, the kids will get more and more pushy, disrespectful, and rebellious because they're like, please react to what I'm doing. Show me that you care about this. The other thing is on the other side, super controlling. So the kid is just like really mad and pushes back on everything because they need to get their space. So they do that by being super mean and disrespectful. But we as parents have to set the boundaries and not be okay with it.
Yeah, that's always a tough one. And you know, someone mentioned earlier or asked early in the conversation, how do you get the respect back? How can you bring respect back or not respect, how can you bring trust back if you've been doing things, your child has been doing things that are counter to trust?
So there's two different sides to that, Val. One you said is that the parents are doing things to break the trust. The other is that the kids are doing things to break the trust, right? So what the kids are doing to break the trust, that is, I believe what that person would be referring to is making teen mistakes, right? Either they were vaping or they lied about things. So that is different than the trust that we're creating as parents. Because the trust that we're creating is in the relationships that I am here for you no matter what you do, no matter what mistakes you make, no matter how rude you are, no matter how many classes you fail, no matter if I found out that you're vaping, I am here for you as a calm, compassionate, loving parent who is setting boundaries and giving consequences, right? All of that. But with the teen, when they are making mistakes, you've got to stop and think about all the things that we have talked about tonight. They need you to understand what they're going through. So it's not about, this isn't necessarily about they need to earn your trust back. That's kind of a different thing even than what we're talking about tonight. What they need to do is earn that trust back, that they're going to be honest with you. So that's one tiny piece of trust. But the relationship itself is what you're going to focus on. And when you can continue these conversations, you can support them through these things that they're doing that are not so great.
Yeah, I think that's important to remember is that, 20 years from now, do we want them to love us? This is what you'd said earlier. Do you want that relationship to be strong, or are you going to really care that they broke curfew or even did something more?
Yeah.
One of my kids was certainly breaking all those boundaries, testing every boundary. But what do I remember now? I remember that she's an awesome kid.
Yeah.
We are at 7:58, so I just wanted to see if there's any more questions before we start wrapping up.
Yeah, and if there's any, let me see here. Yeah, if there's any other questions, put those in. And while you're doing that, I just want to say that there is a longer version of this where I take you through each of the letters and I give you a challenge that will help you to implement that particular concept within your parenting. So if you go, let me actually go to the next slide. If you go to this QR code, that pops you into my Facebook group, and then I can give you access to it in there. So it's kind of a five-part series, and there's a lot, like I said, it's a lot more in depth. I know we talked about a lot tonight in an hour, but that one does have some challenges you can do. So I like that it helps you to implement, which is important. Another thing is, before you leave, if anybody has to jump off, that just put in the chat box an aha moment or something that you are going to do and change based on some of the things that you've thought about, your self-reflection tonight. I would love to see that. And also there is a webinar coming up in the end of June. It's about girl drama and friendship issues. That's a free webinar. And you can come on with me. It's about an hour, just like this one. And we'll be talking about how to best support your daughter so that you can empower her through those difficult friendship things rather than disempower her. So
Sheri, we'll make sure that we include the link. We'll do a recap in the next day or two, and we'll include a link to the free Girl Power webinar.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right. So as everybody's leaving that, someone's asking, where do you get the links? It will be in the follow-up email.
Yeah.
Don't worry, that will be there.
Also,
great.
we put in a link to a very short survey. I think there's 4 questions, and most of them are multiple choice. But if you could take a moment and just tell us how the parent chat was for you tonight, this helps us in bringing more topics and more classes, and letting the Lake Washington Schools Foundation, which funds us, know that in fact you're getting things out of this, out of these parent chats.
Right.
So I'll bump that to the bottom again and stick it in there.
And Val, will you have in the follow-up email, are they going to be able to go ahead and register for next year, or how is that going to work? Okay. Yes. Great.
Sheri will be busy over the summer lining up more topics and guests, and usually we come back in the first, like the 3rd week in September, just enough time to get settled into school. And we do 2 webinars, usually webinar based, a month during the school year. And so we'll include a link so that you can sign up. And then sign up, and you don't have to worry about forgetting and not getting the emails. Right.
One thing off your to-do list for next year already. That would be great.
And I see, where could I find your previous lessons or yes. Okay, that will be in the email too. But you know what? I'm gonna put that really quick again. We have a YouTube channel with all of our recordings, and it's got almost 3 years of recordings in it.
Yes.
So there's a lot there. And we thank Sheri so much for all the wisdom that she has brought on a myriad of topics and with a myriad of guests.
It's been amazing. I can't believe it's been 3 years. Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. All right, so I'm just going to close this out for tonight. I want to leave you with one last thought, because I know we've covered a lot. Many parents think, and this is from all the parents I've talked to, that to be a good parent, that they need to be in control. They need to have all the answers. They have to make sure their child achieves, that they have to be able to fix everything. But that is not what your kids need, I can guarantee you. What they need is a parent who is willing to focus on having conversations that are compassionate and convey unconditional love. And that starts by building the trust. Good night, everyone, and have a fantastic summer.